seulement de l'exploit, tellement il compile les diplômes et surtout les prix. Il est architecte, mais il est surtout ingénieur. Il est diplômé de l'École nationale des ponts et chaussées. Ensuite, il a eu un PhD à Cambridge avant de rejoindre le MIT de Boston. Alors, à peine à 45 ans, il cumule toute une série de prix et de distinctions. Il a même été consacré par la presse américaine comme l'un des designers les plus influents en Amérique. Son design concilie précisément l'environnement matériel et l'univers numérique. Je vous demande tout de suite d'applaudir Monsieur Carlo Ronti. Voilà, c'est à vous pour 45 minutes.
Merci. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Let me see this one. All right. It's a great pleasure to be here. Well, first of all, I just want to review with you some of these changes we've been discussing earlier this morning. Is, what is a smart city? Well, ultimately, it's something quite simple. It's about Internet becoming Internet of Things. It's about all of the networks and sensors and so on that we are created over the past few decades, entering physical space and hence transforming the way in cities. If you want, it's almost like the digital and physical world converging with us in the middle. Let me give you just one example out of many. If you look at this picture, progression of mobile connections on the planet, may seem surprising. Was a time when we could live without mobile phones. 1979 is the first wide commercial cell phone network by NTT, and then it took like 20 years to get to 1 billion, and since then. You might ask yourself, how much more could this grow? Well, 2020. And so the reason is that we started connecting people with people, and then people with data, and more people with machine, with data, and increasingly machine to machine, and things talking to other things, and then changing the way we interact with the environment around ourselves. Almost as if every atom out there in the world were becoming both a sensor and an actuator. Now, if this is the general framework, what I wanted to share with you today is mostly something related to data, and how this actually produces a huge amount of data that we can use and apply in order to better understand and transform our. Now, that estimate is already a few years old. It's an estimate by Eric Smith. If you take all the data produced by humanity from the beginning till 2003, that's the data we now produce every 24 to 48 hours. The quality of the data is not the same. In the first amount of data, you've got everything. You've got checks. There's another definition of big data that I like, is by a colleague and friend at University College in London, Mike Batty. Mike says big data is you need to develop new tools. You cannot use traditional tools in order to analyze it, but you need to develop new tools in order to understand, to visualize it, or to analyze it. So with this in mind, I wanted to share with you today some examples of big the data that we produce, that is produced because, say, we run a cell phone operator, but then we can use the data to better understand or mobility. It's data like this. What you see here is data is the city of Lisbon, and it's a visualization by Pedro Cruz, who was in our lab at MIT. It was at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And what you have here is the city of Lisbon, billions and billions of data points from the taxi network. And we couldn't understand a city like this just a few years ago, but now we can. It's almost like an organism. And then if you take this data and you analyze it, you can find interesting things. What you see here is the same data in New York. If you look at this picture, actually, this picture doesn't have streets. All the streets just come out of all the little dots aligned on the streets where taxis have just 2 points. So we started asking ourselves, what if we could actually, if people were ready to share mobility, what would be the minimum number of taxis that we would need in Manhattan? If you want to phrase it mathematically, you can say, imagine you want to get everybody to destination exactly when they need to be there, give or take maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes. What is then the minimum infrastructure in order to satisfy that mobility demand? Well, again, when you got a large amount of data, sometimes you need to be creative in the way you analyze it. In this case, we did something we call shareability network. That's a paper that was in the proceeding of the National Academy of Science just a few months And what we found was quite interesting. By developing these networks of shareable trips, but the first result came out collaborating with Uber, and as you might know, Uber Pool does exactly that. Uber Pool allows people to share trips in a city and less congestion. Now, what I showed you was about ride sharing, and what you see here is actually what a self-driving car sees around itself, and creates this 3D model, which is then used for navigating. When you go to a self-driving car, then things are going to change again. In the morning when you go to your office, and then can give a lift to somebody else in your family, to anybody else in the city. So what you're doing, you're creating a system in between public transportation and private transportation. Well, if you combine what I was saying before about ride sharing with this, which is a new generation, next generation of car sharing, potentially run the city of Casablanca or the city of Paris or London, Singapore, big city or smaller city, with 20% of the vehicles we have. And think about how different Casablanca would be if you were 8 cars out of 10. If you then look a few years, for instance, you're all familiar with this, it's a well-known traffic light, and traffic lights came on our streets when actually vehicles got onto our streets. But then, if you got an intelligent system with self-driving vehicles, you don't need traffic lights anymore. You can actually have vehicles simply go through the crossing, but you avoid them bumping into each other. Something like this. Don't try yet. Yeah. Well, again, if you take this, it seems like a simple problem, an intersection, but mathematically it can become quite complicated. This is a paper that came out just a few weeks ago, where we looked at the intersection mathematically, tried to really model the different type of systems we can use in order to allow vehicles to cross an intersection. And what you see here is, for instance, the results of the work. To the left and to the right, you see the same number of vehicles. It's a real intersection in Singapore. But then to the left, you got the most intelligent traffic light we have today. And to the right, you have a slot-based system, based on slots, similar to what happens with airports. Look at what happens just after a few minutes in terms of delays, a number of cars waiting to the left and to the right. Exactly the same amount of vehicles. All right, I also want to share with you another type of data we can collect in our buildings. And that's more to understand not the city scale, but actually what happens inside a smart building. How we can really better understand urban fabric from a different point of view. Now, let me start with this, which is the idea in the 1930s by Le Corbusier and others that cities should be totally divided, that we would need a place for working, for living, for leisure, then connections between them. But if you think about that, that's a big waste. It's a big waste because it means that you create cities which are used just for a fraction of the time, and then you got a lot of connection and traffic between connecting those different parts of the city. So it is no surprise that since the 50s and 60s, many people across the world, Jane Jacobs in the United States, but many others, started thinking about mixed-use development. How can we mix different parts of the city? Now, however, today we think that digital is creating a new change. Digital is bringing this one step further. It's like a new way to think about the distinction between public and private, the very structure of our building. And let me share this with you with an example. So what you see here is the MIT campus. You see Boston downtown. Actually, Boston is a very green city. I'm sorry, this picture looks a little bit like post-nuke, but it's a winter picture. And then you see downtown Boston, you see the MIT campus, Harvard up there, don't bother. And MIT was actually one of the first campuses ever to be totally covered by Wi-Fi. So what we decided to do a few years ago was, what if we could actually use the signal from the Wi-Fi to understand the transformation? And the transformation has been incredible. What you see here, you see the way people used to work in a computer room and the way people work today. And this is just enabled by the fact that we are more flexible, more mobile. We can be connected all the time, so we're not chained anymore to a desk. And so because of that, we can actually be more free and change our patterns. Now, this picture is a bit extreme. As you can see, I took the most appalling computer room I could find at MIT, no daylight and anything. And to the right is a beautiful summer day. During the winter, when it's minus 20, it's not the same. But it gives you an idea of some of the changes we have seen. You see them here, going from working, as you see at the top, to the other side, as you see at the bottom. So, as I was saying, these are changes that are produced by the network, and then how to use the network in order to better understand the changes. And then over the past few years, we've done a lot of work in really analyzing the signal from the network, analyzing the network of people communicating with each other in order to better understand the way of the changes in the way of using space. In other terms, it's about the community you have at MIT, and how this community is communicating and moving in different ways because of technology. Now, if you look at this, you see, for instance, people waking up and moving through the campus from one place to the other one. You see all the little bubbles is the number of people in one place at a given time. If you look at the overall aggregated signal, you see something like this. At the top, for instance, you got the total activity on the MIT campus. You see on a Monday morning around 9 o'clock, a lot of people getting to the campus. Few people leaving at 5 p.m., but not that many. You see the 9 to 5 people are just, the peak over there. And then that continues. A lot of people keep working till late, till 8, 9, 10 p.m., and still a lot of activity in the middle of the night between Monday and Tuesday. And then you see Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, different thing, like all over the world, you see activity goes away quickly in the afternoon. And then Saturday or Sunday are almost like normal days. If you remove the 9 to 5 people, you get, really a lot of activity, almost like a normal day. It's something quite interesting. You see there's always a little dent on Sunday night. That's around 9 to 10 p.m. You see it down there. And that's when you say, shit, tomorrow is Monday again. And you remember all the things you haven't finished, and you get back to work on Sunday night to start a new week. Well, if you do this, today what we can do is get for every room on the MIT campus to get something like this, a signature like that. It tells you the occupancy of that room. And you see the signature is different between every space. And then if you analyze the signatures, you can do, again, interesting mathematics. You can do, this is like a Fourier transform, but you can do additional things. And what you find is what I was telling you before, the fact that because of increased flexibility, we are starting to use space in a very different way, overlaying, overlapping different usages over time. We're using now some of this in other projects. This was just recently. It was the Louvre Museum in Paris. And we actually did the same thing, looked at how people move inside the Louvre Museum to see, again, could we actually change the configuration of the museum in order to, how well does the configuration of the museum fit the flows of visitors? This is like the paper, if any of you is interested. That was also reviewed in the Financial Times. We're also using this in design. So this is a master plan in Guadalajara, in Mexico, where we've been using a lot of this knowledge to design what they call Ciudad Creativa Digital, digital creative city. So a place, call it like a Silicon Valley type of place for Mexico. Guadalajara is already one of the hubs for innovation in the country, and the city will be the place where a lot of the innovation can come together. So some of the thinking where both indoor spaces and outdoor spaces can become useful for those activities we were seeing before. Here we see some of the incubators, this kind of porosity that becomes architecture, what I was showing you before, overlapping different activities, how it becomes the design of a building, as you see here. And these are some of the other things we are doing. This is one of the largest co-working spaces in Europe that we just finished in Milan, many thousand square meters. Again, co-working is a new dynamic. I'm sure you're all familiar with WeWork and how they've grown a company to several billion-dollar valuation in just a few years by finding new ways to bring people together to work and be creative. And so this is like for one of the main European players, how you can do this and design new spaces around the new way we work and come together with each other. So these are some of the examples. Some of the other things we're experimenting is how the building itself can start to become dynamic. So if you think that you know in real time all of the occupancy, then how the building could follow you Think about lighting, think about heating, think about cooling. You know, why shouldn't your building go on standby like your computer? When there's nobody there, you stop using energy and you simply just, you know, save a lot of energy and have a more interesting environment that follows people instead of the other way around. And that's something we're prototyping right now in one of these places. Just to finish about this ability to have spaces that then configure themselves and change. That's a project we just presented with Vitra at Milan Design Week just a few weeks ago. And it was really about, you know, how furniture itself can become something that you can control and it can change shape. What you see here is every dot, every piece is actually controlled by online. It has a motor inside, and then you can do any configuration you want on your smartphone or your tablet, and then the furniture will respond to you in the way that's most suited to that activity. So space that becomes dynamic and more responsive. Oops. The second thing I want to share with you, so this was about, you know, using data that we collect in an opportunistic way in space. The last examples were about data coming from the Wi-Fi network and how we can use it to analyze it, to better understand what's going on, and then to respond to it in real time. Another type of data that you find more and more of it is user-generated data. You know, we're all familiar with what we do when we go on Twitter, on Facebook, when we upload something. At the lab, for instance, we were one of the first groups ever to look at pictures uploaded online. What you see here is actually pictures going on Flickr. People take a lot of pictures, and, you know, they end up in the cloud. And in this project, for instance, that we did with the mayor of Florence, who is now the prime minister of Italy, we looked at how people move in Tuscany. And you can look at all of Tuscany and where people take pictures. You can zoom on the way to Florence and see some of the hotspots. And then even in the city, you can go down to the level of the individual building, as you see to the right. Now, if you want to do something slightly more sophisticated, what you can do is also look at the time that every picture is taken. That time is saved in the header of the picture. So you have it, if you develop a little script, you can go and read the timestamp in the picture itself. And when you do that, then you can create actually trajectories of how people move over space. Now, I got a question for you. What you see here is Italians and Americans as they move in Tuscany. And look at how different this is. So between the left and the right. Now, I got a question. Where are the Americans? To the left or to the right? So you need to raise your hands. So Americans to the left, raise your hands. You need to make up your mind, okay? Americans to the right. Because it's more or less 50-50. Well, Americans are to the left here, and you can imagine if you are American, you go to Italy maybe once every 10 years or once in a lifetime. Then you've got the tendency to go to the main hubs. So you see there's Genoa, Pisa, Florence, Siena. But if you're Italian, you've been to those places plenty of times, and you know those cities very well. And look at how different it is going in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the countryside, and trying to discover little hubs or little villages here and there. Now, the same thing you can do in other dimensions. This is something that our students were really excited about, getting to know in real time the best place to go partying in Barcelona and looking at all these pictures that are being taken and uploaded online. I believe they even managed to get a scientific paper approved, proving a significant and very surprising correlation between Britons and parties in the Catalan capital. And if you look at the pictures a bit deeper and analyze the color of the picture, then what you can do, like here, is monitor drought. In Spain, as in Morocco, drought is a big issue. The country gets drier and drier during the summer month. In this case, you just use the pictures that we all take in order to see actually, in a very simple way, to monitor the drought and how it progresses over the country. Instead of doing what we usually do, which is using big monitoring station, you can use this, which is what we call in Spanish, los ojos del mundo, the world's eyes. So almost like borrowing the eyes from all of us in order to understand what is going on in our cities and in our regions. This was just one example using data from pictures, but of course there's a lot of other user-generated data. In the next video, I'll share with you data from Twitter. And analyzing data from Twitter, we discovered something quite interesting. So when we tweet, again, we leave public traces. And then we can use the traces to understand our behavior. And here we looked at a database. That's a paper from a recent paper, but we looked at a 2012 database from the golf tournament. 40 million tweets. You see every tweet is a dot, short tweets at the bottom, and long tweets at the top. And what you see in yellow is the average length of tweets. And you see when you got the round, it intensifies. People tweeting a little bit in between the rounds. But then when you got the rounds, a lot of very short tweets. All right. Now, the last type of data I want to share with you is data that we purposely sense. So we deploy sensors in order to understand, different things in the space we're living, in our cities, in our buildings. The first project I want to share with you is something we did with, again, with our design office. It was at the Expo Milan. We were fortunate enough to do 2 pavilions there. That was last year, 2015, like 6 months ago. As you might know, Expo was 2010 was in Shanghai, 2015 in Milan, 2020 will be in Dubai. And one of the 2 pavilions was what they called the Future Food District. Now, we didn't do the box. This kind of shoe box was given to us, but it told us to do anything we wanted inside the box and outside the box. And what they asked us was, can you think about the way we can distribute products in cities tomorrow? Can we think about, if you want, in quotes, the future supermarket? Now, this is what we did not want to do. That's a beautiful picture by Andreas Gursky, but it's not the idea we had of the future supermarket. That's like an alienating idea of how, all these products can come together. What we liked was this quote. It's by Italo Calvino. I left it in Italian. He's an Italian writer. One of his characters is called Mr. Palomar. Mr. Palomar one day goes to Paris and goes to a cheese shop. And he starts thinking about all the stories behind the products, because behind the piece of cheese he sees. And then Calvino says that the guy thinks like he's in a museum. He's at the Louvre. The idea that today we know a lot about the products we buy, but that information is online, but it's not accessible when we are at the supermarket. And of course, that's not something new. People have tried to make the information more accessible. That's a project by Tesco in the UK. Tesco is a big supermarket chain from the UK. This actually was in Seoul. And you would get your phone, scan a product, and get information about that product. But if you look at this, that's quite alienating as well. It's not really something you want to do. And as a matter of fact, it was in Seoul for a bunch of months, and then it was dismantled. So what we wanted to do was, can we actually use technology to bring back the richness that we have, like here, in a traditional market, in a beautiful market we have here all across Morocco? The richness of interactions between people and products, and people through products. So how can we use technology to bring that richness in the modern supermarket? And the way we did it was like this. As you see, first of all, we put products on tables. A table is a beautiful interface. As humans, we've been using it for thousands of years in order to share things, to sell things, and so on. And then on top of the table, we use a little bit Kinect. The Kinect sensor actually detects people as they move. It detects your body, how you're moving your hands. And through that, we actually would seamlessly display information about the things that you're engaging with. So in a certain sense, it's about how all this information about how you're engaging with the products can start in a seamless way this flow of information towards visitors. This was one of the first sketches, the idea that you touch an apple or point to an apple, and then all this information about that apple could actually easily come to you. If you want, you can still buy the apple in 2 seconds, just grab it. But if you want to stay a bit longer, and the longer you stay, the more information you can engage with. The system will detect that and will share it. So here you see the supermarket as it was built. We also did it in a sloping way. So from one point, you will see everything around yourself. Here you can see the interaction between, at the top, between products and people, and then, as you see, 3 levels. The first level where you touch the physical object, item, and then the second level where you got digital information to augment it, seamlessly being displayed, almost like an accordion that basically opens up as you approach something. And at the top, there's something interesting. If you know about the information you're giving to people, you also know a lot about people, where people are clicking, if you want. It's like the clicking in the digital world, how it becomes clicking in the physical one. And so then you can get the most popular items. Basically, you got the same thing, but seen from the other side, from the side of the supermarket, looking at all the people engaging with products. Well, here you see the built space. It won many prizes and was very popular at the World Expo. Here you see some robots as well to do automated reshelving. You see some people interacting and playing with the products. And here a little video that shows you the interaction inside it. Now, a final project I want to share with you is again about how can we use sensors for detecting things. In different cases, we saw about products in the supermarket, but think about waste, think about trash. And in this project, we started with the following problem. If you look at that computer, today you know everything about it. Every chip in that computer, you see it up there, you know where it originated, how it moved on the planet, how it became that machine. However, if years from now you stop using that machine, you give it to somebody else, at one point somebody will throw it away, and then you know very little about it. Sometimes a lot of e-waste from Europe is shipped illegally to Africa, from the United States to Asia. So that is what happens. So our idea was, what if we could develop a little tag to put on trash and then start following trash? That's a project we started a few years ago, but just last week we released some very interesting results we've done at a global scale, where we were able to show some of the global routes of e-waste smuggling from the United States. And if you're interested, this is just very fresh, so it just went out. It was a PBS broadcasting television in the United States program about it, but basically how all of this, we were able to put many, many sensors onto e-waste and look at the global e-waste smuggling routes out of the United States. But the first project we did, we started with this little tag, and we wanted to have something we could put easily on trash and start following it. A little bit like when you go to hospital, they put a tracer in your blood and they follow it through your body. How to do the same thing at the scale of an entire city. So we developed this thing that's like a miniature cell phone that basically gets its location and sends it back. And it has to last many months, but basically a stripped down version of a cell phone lasting for a long time and reporting back location. This was the first deployment we did in the city of Seattle. We had 500 volunteers, 3,000 items. We put a tag on every item. Every possible thing from e-waste to a banana peel. And after tagging all of them, we started following them. Here you can see the day of deployment in Seattle. After a few days, you see some of the main landfills next to Seattle. But actually, a big surprise, how far stuff started to travel. Look at the trace that went all the way to Chicago, then changed its mind and went back to California. And then still moving after 1 month or 2 months. So the Farewell Symphony was the right music here. So what can you do with this? The first thing, you got all this information, and you can be an architect, an engineer, a planner, and you can actually optimize things in order to decrease the amount of energy being used on the system. In a certain sense, we can do the same thing that has been done on the supply chain over the past few decades, optimizing the supply chain to optimize, call it, the removal chain. So the first thing is really big data can help us to optimize things around ourselves. The second thing that's very important is that big data, if you share it with people, it can per se, by itself, start very interesting dynamics of behavioral change. In this project, we are sharing all the data with people, with volunteers who came with trash, to give the trash to be tagged. And some of them at the end, we did a survey. Again, there is a paper. Is anybody's interested? A scientific paper. But we did a survey and see, we asked them, did this change your behavior? And many people said, yes, quite a lot. Somebody came to us and said, I used to drink water in plastic bottles every day, and then throw away the bottles and forget about them. But now, after the project, I know that those bottles go to a landfill a few miles from home. They will stay in the landfill forever. So because of this, I stopped drinking water in plastic bottle. That's what the person said. So the idea that big data means we know much more about the city, much more about what is around ourselves, and then this information per se can actually help us to change our behavior. That information per se can be a very powerful agent of change. There's a third thing we discovered, and we discovered it more recently. We discovered it when a burglar came to our lab at MIT, and the poor guy stole a lot of things, including tags and computers, that tell you where they go. And this is what happened. Thank you. Yeah.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Carlo Ratti, de cette riche présentation qui nous a un peu tous captivés. En témoigne l'audition. Merci surtout de nous avoir montré toutes les opportunités que pouvaient offrir les nouvelles technologies. Et on se prend à rêver pour Casablanca. Alors, le programme de cet après-midi va continuer. 2 sessions parallèles sont prévues. La première, la planification et croissance urbaine, va se tenir ici, dans quelques minutes, après un petit ajustement technique. Et ensuite, la deuxième session, en parallèle, pardon, sur les clusters de technologies vertes et de systèmes de support, se tiendra cette fois dans l'autre chapiteau, à l'espace networking. Ensuite, vous aurez une pause et on se retrouvera pour la session plénière à 16h30, ici, sous ce grand chapiteau. Donc, bon travail.